Okay, so here's your tablet login screen. By default, the password is 123456. Okay, when you first prompt in, it will prompt you to change the password to a stronger password. You can go ahead and do so. By hitting OK, you're keeping the default password. It is never recommended to keep the default password and always make it a stronger password. Okay, here you have your live view demonstration. With this live view, when an individual sticks their head over within the field of view, they will see a little temperature above the person's head in green font. And this is just your standard mode, so there's going to be no snaps on the left or the right. By choosing the face detection mode down here in the bottom, you will stretch the image here, and then anything that appears on the left will be your facial recognition if using your facial recognition database. Anything that appears on the right will be just a standard face capture. From here, you could click that image and add the individual into the facial recognition database. Going to the configuration menu, this is your basic menu setup. So under system, you have just your basic information. The basic information will give you the camera name, the current build that you have, and things of such. You have your date and time and your local config, of course. This is where any recording and or snapshots are saved. Under the storage, if you're using an SD card, this is where you would go ahead and format the card. So when you first put in an SD card, it will say the state is abnormal. You will need to format it. It will say formatting and then normal once complete. Okay, by default, the snapshot quota is 10%. The video quota is 80%. So if you did want to change it and allocate more for the snapshot, you'd go ahead and change it and then hit format. It would go through the format process, and then once it was done, it would save. If you just changed it without hitting format, it would revert back to the 10 and the 90%. Okay, the next menu is your face configuration menu. So under your face configuration menu here, this is where you have your different options. You can check off the liveliness detection, and that will help prevent anyone from taking an image on a phone or a printout and inputting it or holding it up in front of a tablet, stopping or allowing them to match and then allow to pass through. So liveliness detection being enabled will stop such. You do have options for trigger an SD snap, an SD recording, an email, or an FTP. The FTP you would have to set up and have an FTP linked to, which would be done under the network settings, which we will get to. The comparison config by default is every 4 seconds, so every 4 seconds it will snap a picture. Please keep in mind, even if you're not using facial recognition, the camera itself is still a face recognition camera. So that means that when somebody walks in front of the tablet, it will snap a picture of their face as long as they meet the 15% requirement that you see here. Okay, so again, that being said, when you're in the data search record and let's say for instance, I have trigger SD snaps, you will see duplications of pictures, meaning every 4 seconds, if I held my face in front of the tablet longer or stopped to have a conversation, I might have 5 snaps or so of my face, and only one of them has a temperature. That means that when I stuck my face in the tablet, it read the temperature, it marked it with that image, but I took a step back and then I was, talking to somebody else, and it kept on snapping pictures. Again, the camera is a true facial recognition camera. It's doing what it's supposed to do. Many that have used the data record tab, which we'll cover, has seen the multiple snaps. We are in the process of adding a filter option. That way you can filter it just for temperature snaps and cut out all the other snapshots that are within there. Again, highlighting this because it is an important piece of information, so people do not think that there is something wrong. Similarity threshold by default is 75%. So if you want to really narrow it down to make sure, brothers, siblings, or two people that may look similar aren't passing for the same individual, you can go ahead and higher this. The higher the similarity percentage, the more likely the more points of that specific person that is added into the database with a picture it is looking for. Okay, now if you do not want the face recognition on, if you've seen at the bottom of the tablet it does the matching. If you're not using the facial recognition, a lot of people like to get rid of that because it says trying to match and then it's not a match. By unchecking the face comparison will eliminate that panel down at the bottom of the display screen itself. Okay, under the face database management, This is where you can go ahead and add multiple people. So go by hitting search, you'll see anybody that is already loaded into the database. You can delete and or modify. Here is your single add. So on top of just from the live view being able to add, I can go ahead and add individuals here. So this will be for my desktop, and I'll just re-add myself. I can go ahead and put in the name and different characteristics. And then I would go ahead and enter, and it would go ahead and enter. So again, you can add multiple snaps. People have asked, well, what happens about reading with a face mask? Though when I enter my picture without a face mask, when I do have a face mask on, it still does match me. But the facial database does hold up to 20,000 faces. So one could, or we've had people question adding a picture with and without a face mask, so that can be done. Here is your multiple adding, so it gives you a rule and an example. So by hitting the example, it's here's the user image and here is the Excel sheet. Now basically what you're doing is you're inputting the information and you're basically following these rules on screen. So 1 for gender, 0 male, 1 for female, 0 for visitor, 1 for allow list, 2 for block list, and things as such. You'd fill this out with all the employee information. You would then save it into your folder here. Then you'd upload all the images of those individuals. So let's say there was 20 people. I filled out the 20 people on the list, saved it, put in the 20 images into this folder, and then from here I would browse the folder. So you're not uploading the single images, you're not uploading just the Excel, you're saving both the Excel and the single images into one folder, and then browsing, selecting that folder, and uploading. Once it's complete, again, you can hit the search and it'll give you a full population. Now, if you're using the CMS, you can use the CMS as a central database, meaning you can go ahead and add 10 tablets. I do the same thing with the Excel and the photos, and then I would upload that folder in and it would push it to all 10 tablets. Okay, under the Access Control menu, under the Access Control config, this is where you can select your language, and this is the language displayed on the screen. The selecting the voice is the different languages as well, and this is the language that is the audible warning that is spoken. Okay, you'll see custom voice 1, 2, and 3. This will be in the new firmware where you're able to upload your own Wav files. So you'll be capable of doing so, and then once you do so, you can select custom 1, 2, or 3. By default, the screen sleep saver is turned to never, but you do have an option. So if you do want it to go black when there is nobody in front of the tablet, you can go ahead and select X seconds all the way up to 2 minutes, and then it would go to sleep, or it would not, the tablet is not itself is still being powered. The screen itself is just going to sleep, turning black. Okay, you do have your volume control and the screen brightness as well. Okay, there's a tamper alarm setting, so if you enable this, you do have options to trigger an alarm output, trigger an SD snap, a recording, an email, or an FTP. Now, there is a small button on the back of the panel you may have noticed. So when you're putting this up into the wall mount that is included in the box with the tablet, that little button is pushed in up against the wall mount. So if it is released or ripped off the wall, that would then trigger the tampering and send you that alarm output and or email. The question's been asked of what happens if it's on a pedestal. It really becomes twofold there. If they rip it off the pedestal, then, or the wall mount that sits on the pedestal itself, then yes, it would trigger that. If an individual just picks it up and throws the whole entire pedestal over their shoulder, obviously there's no doing there. They're just ripping the entire power out. But more than likely, you're going to notice an individual running away with a 4 to 5 foot pedestal mount. Okay, you do have your door lock feature and the Wiegand config. Now, this is something that you're going to reference the Quick Start Guide, and that will be located with the video link there. It does show you the output triggers on the tablet itself on the back panel. But with a door lock, you're basically connecting the door lock feature to the mag lock of the door, and then you can check off by normal temperature or mass detection on, meaning if the individual has a normal temperature, if you can check 1 or 2, so if you check both, I would come up, scan my face, And as long as I had a normal temperature and it detected a mask on, it would then unlock the door. You have the delay timing and the duration it stays open below. Okay, these are your different, your unlocking groups are for if you're using facial recognition, I'm on the allow list, and then I can pass through as well. Now, Wiegand configuration, in the newer firmware, it will support the multiple. Currently, right now, it supports the 26 and the 34-bit, but as you can see in the newer firmware, it will support the multitude of interfaces here. And again, the quick start guide will reference and show you the panel itself is not integrating into an access control system. It's simply tablet to a single individual reader. So the reader itself is still connected to the full access system. It's doing and reporting on the access system itself. You're just tying the data 0, the data 1, and the ground from the tablet into the Wiegand reader, or any reader that supports a Wiegand mode and one of these bit interfaces. Again, as long as it works with one of these bit interfaces, it will work with one another. And then you have the Wiegand input and the output. Basically saying input is the reader prior to the tablet, output is the reader after the tablet. So, a case in point, if I went and chose input here, the reader would be prior to the tablet. When I enrolled myself, I would put EJ and then under the ID number, and just quickly to go back and show you, I will search myself and I'll hit modify. So under the ID number, I would put in my badge number that is associated to my access badge. Okay, so let's just say in this case 001, I'd modify it, I'd save it. Okay, there's my ID number there. So when you come back to the Wiegand, I didn't save it, that's why it's not there. The Wiegand input, I come up to the badge reader, I scan my badge, I get a success message. I have now 5 seconds to walk over to the temperature tablet and scan my face. It sees that I match within the database, and I get a 2-step verification match from the badge reader, from my from the facial recognition, and then the alarm output would be wired to the door, and then it would trigger and open the door. Output is just vice versa. I would go up to the tablet first, scan my face, get a match, and then go to the badge reader, scan my badge, 2-step verification match, and then the alarm output would open the door. Okay, under image is just your basic general settings. So you have your display settings. We won't spend too much time on these. These are pretty self-explanatory. Your video and audio. The tablet does have a built-in mic and a built-in speaker. By default, it is turned on. So if you wanted to disable, you can go ahead and come here. Again, by default, it is on. Otherwise, you have your standard OSD menus here. And this here, the device name, is where you can change your IP camera name. So by default, it's IP camera. If I had multiple cameras, I can choose front door, back door, and things of such. The white light control is on by auto. You can choose it to turn off or manual. Now, by choosing manual, you're forcing the light to stay on all the time. By choosing off, it will never turn on. Now, that white light's a soft white light. That is used for the facial recognition and the reading of a temperature and or to see a mask. It is triggered when there's low light detected in the area. I'm mentioning this because a lot of people like to turn it to manual and keep it on. That's more of something you do not want to do, because if it's already a bright room and that light is on, the glare that it can produce on the face could stop or hamper a temperature reading. We've had individuals do that. So again, it's recommended if it's in a well-lit area nonstop and you never want it to turn on, keep it to off. Otherwise, leave it as auto, which it is by default. Okay, now face exposure is more so along the lines of, we say to keep it on, out of the direct light of any of the ceiling lights that you may have here. If it's a particular area where it's all lighting and it's really hard to do so and angle away from, you can go ahead and enable the face exposure by lowering and or hiring it. By default, it's on and it's set at the mid-range range level. So next is the alarm menu, and this is where all your temperature and your mask detection are. So under the temperature measurement, by default, it's set to accuracy mode. There's two modes, accuracy and speed. Now, accuracy mode is going to take about 4 to 5 seconds for an actual reading, and that's going to give you a spot-on reading versus speed mode. Now, what speed mode does is it will allow a reading from a little bit of a further distance, anywhere from about 18 to 24 inches, but just like a thermal gun, if you've ever used one, they usually say keep it in mind of accuracy for about 1 meter or 3 feet. If you get too far away, the temperature may read a little bit cooler. Okay, so when using speed mode, you will get a further distance read, again, 18 to 24 inches, but that temperature may be a little bit cooler. Where accuracy mode is, you have to fit your face directly into the silhouette that's on the screen, hold it there for an extra 2 to 3 seconds, and you'll get an accurate reading that's not going to read too low. Okay, you can switch it between Celsius and Fahrenheit. By default, it is set to Fahrenheit. The high and the low temperature are editable. Now, we usually say that the high temperature to set it to about 99 to about 99.5 or 100, so anywhere between 99 and 100. Please remember this is reading skin temperature. Your actual core temperature that they say is reading a fever is 100.4. So you're taking that relevance and you're matching it to your core. So when something's going on, if your core was heightened and warmer, then your skin temperature warms up. So you don't necessarily want to set this too high because then it may not meet the threshold. An analogy I like to give is there's 3 ways of taking your actual temperature: rectal temperature, which is 100%, under the arm, and then under your tongue. I believe they say under the tongue it's usually add 1 degree, under the arm add 2 degrees. So it's the same reference here. Again, it's taking the skin temperature, so you don't want to set it to the exact 100.4. You want to set it to about 99.5, where it's slightly lower, so if that skin temperature is elevated, then there's a slight indication that there may be something else going on. Okay, you have your alarm holding time and your trigger alarm outs. So in this case here, and this is in a newer firmware, which will be released shortly, you'll see I can now link my alarm 1 and my alarm 2 to a normal and or a warning temperature out of range, meaning I'll be able to hook a green and a red strobe up. So a green to alarm 1, a red to alarm 2. When I walk up to the tablet and I have a normal temperature range, it'll blink green. If I have an over temperature, it would blink 2. So this is being added into the latest firmware. Trigger audio alarm. That is the temperature alarm that will be. That's the audible alarm that will be spoken. So I stick my face in the tablet, and it'll say normal temperature detected. Again, if you're using the Wav files and you're uploading your own Wav file, that is where it would display that message. So if you do not want that message, you can uncheck the trigger audible audio alarm. In most cases, people like to have it for the temperature alert. Some for the mask, they turn it off. Some prefer both on. Okay, if I did have an SD card inputted here, I would go ahead and trigger the SD snap, meaning anytime I stuck my face into the tablet, got a temperature read, it would snap my photo and then apply the temperature to that snapshot. I can also trigger an SD recording, meaning I would come up to the tablet, stick my face there, and it would have a recording of me doing so. Now, triggering email. You can have up to 5 recipients. Okay, here I have myself, and you can attach a picture. In a future upgrade firmware, we're going to have an option, just like you can attach a picture, it's going to have an option to attach temperature. Currently, right now, when you receive an email, it will populate with a snapshot of the person, and then in the body of the email, it will say the temperatures. Because of some privacy concerns, not everybody wants that temperature there. So again, it will be a checkoff option, just like the attached picture. You can create your own subject line and the content within there. Again, so if you have multiple tablets, the subject can be over temperature, and then the email content can be front door, back door, and things of such. Now, things to remember with the email, and I'll show you that in the network. The tablet must be networked. Okay, you can't connect a laptop directly to the tablet and have Wi-Fi on the tablet. That's not passing through. You have to do the standard port forwarding, meaning you plug the tablet into the network, you define your ports, you log into your router, You set up the port forwarding, and then once the tablet can see the outside world, you'd be able to set up the networking, to set up the emailing, and it'd be able to push out. You can use Gmail and Outlook 365. It is supported for both as the push, but again, the most important thing where a lot of people do get confused and or forget, you do still have to set up the networking portion, which is port forwarding. And you cannot just plug a laptop directly to it that has Wi-Fi capability. That is not giving it access. Yes, it gives your computer access to Wi-Fi, but that Wi-Fi isn't passing through to the tablet. Okay, when you're done, you would save, and you get a save message here. Okay, under the mask detection, it's the same thing here. So if you wanted to disable it, you can go ahead and uncheck the enable box. You have your alarm out in 1 and 2. In essence, if they didn't have a mask detection, you can set an alarm trigger. In this case, the example with the temperature measurement, I said the alarm 2 was going to be the red strobe. So if I check this off and an individual wasn't wearing a mask, the red strobe would, strobe and or siren would go off for no masks. You also have the options of trigger audio alarm, trigger SD snap, trigger SD recording, trigger email, which breaks down the same exact way, and trigger an FTP. Okay, your exceptions are just errors that could occur. So you have your detection config, your SD card full, SD card error, an IP collision or conflict, and the cable disconnected. Enabling these give you your different fields and options of what you can do when one of these were to occur. Okay, networking. So now on the networking, you have your TCP/IP. By default, the tablet is set to DHCP, so we'll automatically pick up an IP address. Otherwise, if you're not connecting it to the network, the default IP address of the tablet is 192.168.226.201. Again, the default IP address of the tablet is 192.168.226.201. So if you were to plug a laptop directly into the tablet, you'd have to change your NIC scheme on the laptop to match that IP address, and then you'd open up the Internet Explorer and be able to type in that IP address and connect to the local GUI of the tablet. Okay, next you have your port, and this is where I was telling you you do your port forwarding. So as you can see here, I changed my HTTP port, my data port, and my RTSP port. The RTSP is for streaming video. The data port is for when connecting to the CMS. This is the port you use, and the HTTP is for the web browser. So if you change your ports, again, it does reflect it on the local IP side. As you can see here, I have my local IP : and then my HTTP port, but this is also what gives you the access to the outside world. Okay, next is your email. You have your FTP, so if you were using an FTP, you can set it there, your HTTPS. The UPnP doesn't, I don't usually recommend using this for your port forwarding. That's all dependent on the router. If it's not enabled in the router, it will not work. And then I've seen plenty of routers that are just updated and then that feature is lost. So it may be working and then stop working. So again, it's not something I highly recommend. I recommend doing the standard port forwarding. Now, under the email, you'll see here, I have a Gmail account. It will work with Outlook Office 365 as well. Okay, so for the sender and the username, you want to put the full email address in, which means including the @gmail.com. Okay, you'd put in the password. We do have an anonymous login option, which means that you do not have to put a password in. When using this, you have to remember to enable anonymous login on your email server. Okay, so we've had individuals call and test it with the Outlook 365, sending it from there, and they were saying it wasn't working. That is because you have to log into your email server and enable it on that side. That way, again, it's a two-step on your email server and within the GUI of the tablet. You can't just check it off on the tablet, and if it's not enabled on your server side, it will not pass through. So that is key to remember. Okay, the server address for Google is smtp.gmail.com. The Gmail uses SSL and port 465. Outlook 365 or Outlook Office 365 uses your server address from your provider, and it can use the SSL or the star TLS. and it will support both port 465 and 587. One thing to keep in mind if using Gmail, you can use Gmail, and the one additional thing you have to do is log into the actual Gmail account, go to security options, and then under the security, you're going to scroll down to the bottom and allow less secure apps. So again, you have to log into your actual Gmail account, go to security and sign in, scroll to the bottom and allow less secure apps. You can have the tablet port forwarded and being seen from the outside network. You can have all this information correct, but if you do not allow the less secure apps, it will not push through. So that's very important. As said earlier, you can have up to 5 recipients. Anyone that's asked for, well, I need it to go to more, you can always do forwarding. So if I have EJ Covell here, I can go into my email server and have EJ forward to 7 other individuals. So that's one way around getting more recipients out of the only 5 limited that are within the tablet. So again, from your server side, you can always push and forward from that one email account. Okay, under the security, this is where you really have your different users. So you can go ahead and create users. By default, you have your admin. The online users will show you the connections of the devices. Okay, you can create a block and or an allow list. Okay, the security management, this is the enable the locking illegal login. So after 5 failed attempts, it will lock the device for 15 minutes. And then you have your maintenance. So under your backup and restore, you can load the defaults. Exporting and importing currently does not work on the tablets. Again, this is a shared GUI between other cameras and from the DVRs itself. If you've ever used the Paramount series, you've seen this. The tablets themselves, because they are unique, do not have this, but it's still using the same GUI structure. So again, you cannot import and export from one tablet to the next. But the default settings is here under the backup and restore. You can reboot the tablet remotely. Under the upgrade screen is where you would do an upgrade. So when there is an upgrade release, you would take the file, save it, browse it, select it, upgrade. It would run through and then reboot. And then you have your operation logs. So you can go ahead and search all the different operation logs if you're looking to find anything in particular. So you have your major types, and then you'd pick your subtype from there. Okay, please keep in mind, just a couple things to keep in mind here. And this is one thing I forgot to show you actually. This is the Wav File Firmware. So this is where you would go ahead and select and upload your own audio wave files. So for normal temperature, I would record, and keep in mind, these are the restrictions. The file type has to be, it cannot be 8-bit, it has to be 16-bit. The file size has to be less than 30K. It has to be in the monophonic, and 8,000 hertz. Okay, anything else, it will fail when you're trying to upload. So if I recorded a message to replace normal temperature and it said, welcome to InVid, I'd select this file, choose here, and then I would upload. And then I would change it for the warning temperature and then upload my next, and so on and so forth. And then I'm loading it under the custom voice 1, and again, that's where under here I choose my custom voice 1. Again, things to remember, the tablet is not PoE. It does require a 12-volt DC power supply that is sold separately. It does not do PoE. It does not do Wi-Fi. Questions asked all the time about Wi-Fi. An option that people have done is connecting a hardwire Wi-Fi router to the tablet and then setting up a bridge. So from that Wi-Fi router to the standard router, it will give you that. Things to keep in mind also, though, with Wi-Fi, it is a convenience network. Most times it is not a monitored network, so if it does go down and you do have email notifications set up, you may not receive that email. Okay, and really quick, this is your data search tab. This is where you're exporting, so you can put in a start date and time and hit a search. Okay, and again, it's not the most flattering, as you can see some of my pictures here, but I have a total of 33 records. Now, you could see in all these pictures here, these 15, there's no temperature next to any one of them. This tablet is right by my desk, so every time I basically back up, it's doing what it's supposed to, as I explained before. It's snapping pictures of my face. Again, not the most flattering pictures, but it's doing its job. Okay, as I go on to the next batch, these two here do not have any temperature related. Okay, none of them have any temperature related. So what I will do here, and let me just verify I didn't miss one. Okay, so in that case, what I'm going to do, you see the last one with me looking up. Okay, so I just actually stuck my face in there to record, and I'll research. Now you can see I actually have a temperature tagged to this photo. Now this is where you can tell the difference, where the person is actually looking head on and direct, and that's why there's a temperature. And the two following pictures, again, are just the facial recognition snaps. They are going to occur. Okay, but as you can see the clear difference. All the other photos are me backing up, looking other different directions, looking upwards, looking downwards, whereas the snap for the temperature is basically head on. To get a more defined search, right now it's under the 24-hour search. I can put in an hour, a half hour, 15 minutes. We will be adding a filter button here, and the filter button will give you an option for, let's say, for temperature. That way, when you do the temperature and you do the filter for the temperature, it would only show you the snaps for any temperature-related snaps and not all the facial recognition. You can export. Okay, I'll save it here. Go to my desktop. This will go into a Excel format. And once it's saved, it will look like this. Let me pull this up real quick. Hold on one second. Okay, so it will give you the information and the snapshots of the individual. And if there was a temperature reading, it'll include the temperature, the date, the time, and if the individual is enrolled like myself, it will show that information. All right, if there's any other questions, please feel free to always call our technical support line at 631-388-5700, and that's prompt 3. Again, 631-388-5700, prompt 3. Thank you very much.